Welcome to Desperately Seeking the 80s. I am Meg.
And I'm Jessica. Meg and I have been friends since 1982. We got through middle school and high school together here in New York City, where we still live.
And where we podcast about New York City in the 80s. I do Ripped from the Headlines.
And I do pop culture.
What'd you do this weekend?
Memorial Day weekend. How delightful to have a long weekend, right?
Depends.
Oh,
you had a lovely weekend, I gather?
I had a lovely weekend, and this is very on brand for us. I was with childhood friends and my brother. So we
nice.
all endured the 80s together, or celebrated or lived or whatever the 80s. And in fact, one of the people who I was with, Nina, comes up frequently because so many of my ridiculous shenanigans as a child were with Nina.
That's right.
Who also listens to the podcast. So
Yay.
She was a fabulous hostess with her husband, Michael.
Oh, that's so nice.
And we were with our siblings as well who went to Fleming. So it was a good family time, and of great excitement. I have to share this because we've talked in the past on this podcast about the fact that neither one of us can drive. And that one of my great regrets is that I let my license lapse when I was 37. So what is that? 2007. What is it? I have to get a learner's permit and take the road test again.
Okay.
And the delightful human being who is Michael let me drive his car.
Amazing.
So
he trusts you.
He does. He broke the seal. So now I'm ready. I'm ready to take on the New York City
Did
DMV.
you go around the block? Did you go on the highway?
I went on a 5-mile circular jaunt through the towns that make up the area or county or hamlet. I don't know what things are called in the country, and picked up pizza.
So you drove into a parking lot and you parked.
I parallel parked. I did.
Whoa.
So I think that what we need to address on this podcast at some point is that we are getting our act together and taking it on the road.
Oh my God. That's
We're going to take
daunting.
it on the road. We're going to take it on the road, Meg. It's going to be very exciting.
So this week, I'm taking on a subject that I know nothing about.
Okay, what I love about this intro is that your tone is like, it's a very special episode of Desperately Seeking the 80s. And I thought you were going to talk about something sensitive, but what I love is that it turns out you're what's very special about this particular podcast.
My question for you, my engagement question
is your engagement question, what's it like to frequently not know what you're talking about on this podcast? Because I can definitely speak to that. Yes, indeed. And if you cut this, I will absolutely be furious.
Kidding, I'm not going to cut it. No. My question is, I don't know whether you know anything about it either. So my question is, have you ever been to a baseball game?
Yes, I have.
Tell me about your engagement with baseball.
I that's so bananas, but I love it. So here's my thing with baseball. My allegiance is to the Mets, which I know is not a popular thing, but I grew up in a household with a dad who was a Dodgers fan. Oh. And so when the Dodgers moved to LA, no self-respecting Dodgers fan was going to become a Yankee fan. So it was Mets all the way. As far as I'm concerned, let's go Mets. And secondly, just to really get excited now, because I'm actually kind of geared up for a fight, not with you, but generally today. So this is exciting. I feel like rooting for the Yankees is lazy because you're rooting for the ones who win. That's just getting on a bandwagon. That's not really being a fan. That's bandwagoning. That's weak. So yeah, I'm going there. And secondly, I think that if you live in a city where there is a baseball diamond
field, stadium,
yes,
Listen to me, I've learned things.
You do well. I'm very excited to hear you talk about sports. You can seriously.
I'm so scared.
But what's wrong with a summer day sitting with your friends in the stands, drinking beer outside, eating hot dogs, and basically socializing while there is a somewhat amusing game happening on a green field in front of you?
Sounds lovely.
And you get the best of New York wackadoodles at the game.
That's such an endorsement.
So I say, yay, baseball.
Okay. And 'tis the season, correct?
Yay, verily.
Okay. I mean, I don't know.
I just gave you
word on the street.
I know.
It's baseball season.
I know there was a Sammy Sosa. I know about Reggie Jackson.
Don't get ahead of yourself.
All right.
My sources are a documentary called Bronx Zoo 90, Crime, Chaos, and Baseball. Fantastic documentary.
Love it.
New York Post, Wikipedia, and Joe helped me out with this a bit.
I love that your husband is he's in your, what do you call it? Bibliography?
Glossary. I was like, what does this mean?
You're like, what is this bat you speak of?
Yes. In December 1981, George Steinbrenner, legendary owner, the boss of the Yankees, signed Dave Winfield to a 10-year contract, unknowingly making him the highest paid player in baseball. How did he not know that,
that seems like he might have been, drink.
No. I'm about to tell you how he didn't know. You see, Steinbrenner thought he was signing Winfield for $16 million over 10 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't catch the cost of living clause that actually made the contract worth $23 million, which would be more than $85 million today.
Oh my God. Well done, sports agent.
Yeah. Steinbrenner had been an unusually hands-on owner since he and a group of investors had purchased the Yankees from CBS in 1973 when Bill Paley was chairman.
Circling back to the Swans.
Yep. He was a micromanager and notorious for firing people on a whim. He wasn't into developing players and coaches and managers, but quickly trading them if they didn't perform. He may have been the initial source for Trump's "you're fired." That's in the documentary. It's implied that Trump got it from him.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Does the documentary also talk about Seinfeld?
Yeah, briefly.
Okay.
He enforced a military-inspired hair policy. No facial hair except mustaches, and scalp hair could not be grown beneath the collar. In 1983...
Wait, I need to stop you for a second. Do you know how disgusting the phrase scalp hair is?
They had to be specific.
I know, but it's really grody.
In 1983, Steinbrenner made Yankee coach Yogi Berra order Goose Gossage to shave his beard. Gossage shaved his beard, but left a thick, expanded horseshoe mustache that looks like a large landmass on each cheek.
Okay, am I still allowed to keep barfing?
I mean, he's actually kept it to this day. It became his signature.
So he has upper cheek hair.
He has upper cheek hair that he combed into a mustache, basically.
So there was a mustache, and then the mustache extended up his cheeks and then into his scalp hair.
Basically, he was told to shave his beard, but he only shaved what would be considered a beard. So then all of this on his cheek, he said, but that's mustache territory.
Oh my God. This is the stuff of legends.
This on the Instagram, believe you me, because
the stuff of legends.
He came up with this idea and then he doubled down for life.
You know what I love? I love revenge facial hair. I mean, go Goose.
Right. Steinbrenner swore he was too busy to be involved in the day-to-day operations of the team, but he lied. He was involved in every detail, hiring and firing and rehiring his managers and coaches. When he discovered his blunder with Winfield's contract, he could have brushed it off as not a big deal, or spun it somehow as a genius move, but instead he began a public smear campaign aimed at his own player.
That sounds very Trumpian.
It does, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Quote, "Where is Reggie Jackson? We need a Mr. October or a Mr. September. Winfield is a Mr. May. My big guys are not coming through. The guys who are supposed to carry the team are not carrying the team. They aren't producing." I mean, he's saying this publicly. He's basically berating the people that work for him to the tabloids, to the press.
Yeah.
That's not a good management style.
I'm sure that you know this from having done the research that you've done, but Steinbrenner was known to be an asshole.
Point. He tried many times to trade Dave Winfield to another team, but Winfield had played 10 years in the league and 5 years with the same team. So, according to the rules set down by the Major League Baseball Commission, he had a right to refuse any trade. Did you follow all that?
I certainly did.
Cool. So did I.
Okay, well done. All right. I know this was hair-raising.
Yeah.
You did a good job.
And partly to piss off George Steinbrenner, Dave Winfield refused all potential trades.
So now I'm liking Dave Winfield.
Oh my God. So Steinbrenner kept saying like, oh, this trade and this trade. And then Winfield would tell like the other guys that, you know, he played ball with or whatever. He was just like, I'm not going to say yes to that. I'm just not going to say yes to that. I mean, he wouldn't even consider it because he was just like, fuck that guy. He can't tell me where to go and what to do. I want to be a Yankee, so I'm going to be a Yankee. Fuck him. Yay. And then he wrote a book.
Gack.
Oh, Steinbrenner loved lashing out in the tabloids about his players and coaches, which again, I'm so sorry, it's such a shitty management style, like to berate people rather than inspire people.
I think it's generous to call it a style.
But look, he's berating them, but God forbid any of them speak up. So when Dave Winfield came out with the book, like Steinbrenner's head was blowing off his body.
His scalp hair flew off.
Right. Now, Dave Winfield wasn't intimidated. This is what he said to some press guy. Quote, "These days, baseball is different. You come to spring training, you get your legs ready, your arms loose, your agents ready, your lawyer lined up."
Yeah.
Because it was constant with Steinbrenner. And Steinbrenner felt the hit. Dave Winfield had set up the David M. Winfield Foundation for Underprivileged Youth, which provided tickets to games, holiday dinner giveaways, and national scholarships. It was a pretty expanded foundation. It wasn't a simple one-room operation. There was also a wing of the foundation that partnered with health clinics to promote nutrition and substance abuse prevention. And apparently he was one of the first baseball players, to really get into this whole, like, I'm going to have a foundation. I've got a crap load of money. I can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
When Dave Winfield signed with the Yankees, in the contract that we talked about earlier, he set aside $3 million of his salary to go to the foundation, or $300,000 a year. Steinbrenner suggested to the press that the foundation was mishandling its funds and therefore he didn't have to pay it. Or he would put the money in escrow. There was a lot of dodging. In the press, he made it sound like it was his choice, like it was his personal contribution, when in fact, it was part of Winfield's salary and he was contractually obligated to pay it. So Winfield sued his boss.
Good.
And then along came Howie Spira. Howie was born in the Bronx in the shadow of Yankee Stadium, and he was working as a stringer. Do you know what a stringer is? No. It's a freelance press person.
Neat.
I know. Okay. That's how he met Dave Winfield. He was like, "Hey, can I ask you about the game?"
I love it. Did he have like a press card in his fedora?
Yes, that's
Okay.
what I imagined.
I know. I felt it.
He charmed Winfield and started volunteering as a publicist for his foundation. In his spare time, Howie was gambling. A lot. And way beyond his means. He got into a crap load of trouble with the mob. All 5 families, in fact.
No.
Yes.
Oh, Howie, you got nowhere to run.
Seriously, he really didn't. And he had to figure a way out.
Cleveland?
I mean, he was like millions of dollars, so he says.
Oh.
Howie claimed that he had knowledge of Dave Winfield using foundation funds to pay for his girlfriend's jewelry and vacations. In 1986, Dave Winfield opened a restaurant called the Border Cafe.
Oh, I remember Border Cafe.
Yeah, it's like a Mexican place.
Yeah.
And Howie was certain that he had financed it with embezzled foundation money. Howie called Steinbrenner and left a message, quote, "I'm the guy who made a mistake by going with Dave Winfield. I just need a few minutes of your time." 10 minutes later, George Steinbrenner calls him back. George says, "Come to Tampa so we can meet." Howie flew down and met with George, asking for $100,000 and relocation to Tampa because he's got to get out of town, right? And he had to like get away from the mob people and the bookies and all that. Howie gave Steinbrenner all the details he had about Winfield's supposed misdeeds. And he claims George sent a sex worker from international hostesses to his hotel room that night. He flew home the next day.
A happy man. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
And yes, he was, but also because he thought he had a deal. He thought, like, all right, now this is it. I solved my very
sticky
problem. But Steinbrenner never followed up. So he didn't get that $100,000 to him, and he didn't relocate Howie to Tampa. He just sort of didn't do it. And Howie felt abandoned and bitter. In the meantime, Steinbrenner and Winfield kind of made up, or at least they settled the lawsuit over the foundation contributions. They both kind of admitted that they were sort of wrong, and they shook hands.
Oh, so Dave had been embezzling from his own foundation?
No, but he said that there was misappropriation that he wasn't aware of, and he corrected it. And Steinbrenner agreed to give the money that he actually owed the foundation. And they shook hands, and they said kind of nice things about each other in front of the press.
Okay. Or less horrible things about each other.
Right, exactly. And everyone was like, wow, like, has hell frozen over? But here we have it. Realizing that he no longer had any leverage, Howie came up with a new approach. He would extort George Steinbrenner. He called incessantly. He threatened and badgered. Now he had dirt on Steinbrenner. And if that was the most valuable tool in his arsenal, so be it. When Howie said he'd go public, basically telling the world that George had heard all of this like dirt on Winfield, finally Steinbrenner buckled and paid him $40,000 in a combination of 2 checks. Howie cashed them, but he wasn't satisfied. He tracked down numbers for Steinbrenner's wife and mother. He sent letters. He started calling Steinbrenner's barber obsessively. "Where's my $2?"
Oh my God, he's that kid. He's the paper route kid.
From
Better Off Dead.
Better Off Dead. It was full-on harassment and extortion. His threats were kind of hard to parse. It sounded like his fear of the mob also played a part in all this. This is one quote, because he recorded all of the conversations he had with Steinbrenner. So this is a quote from one of them. Quote, "I swear if anything happens to my mother, George and Dave better both hire a lot of extra security, because then I will really be out of control."
But no one was threatening your mother. You were threatening someone else's mother.
So it's like, what are you saying? But it was all very unsettling, okay? Then the FBI showed up. Basically, Steinbrenner was like, I can't deal with this. So he made a couple calls. And Howie was arrested for trying to extort Steinbrenner. The downside of having Howie arrested was that Fay Vincent, the baseball commissioner, took a close look at all this mess. Steinbrenner dodged and weaved with all kinds of explanations for why he apparently paid a gambler to give him dirt on his own player. And this was all in the 1990 baseball season, which was a notoriously disastrous one for the Yankees, both on and off the field, which is a whole different story, but watch the documentary. Fascinating. Fans turned on Steinbrenner, blaming him for the whole mess, which actually seemed pretty legit. He was a micromanager, after all, and the team was a complete disaster. Dave Vincent banned George Steinbrenner from baseball for life on July 30th, 1990. Does that surprise you that he was banned for life in 1990? It should, because it didn't last very long.
No, it lasted like for 10 minutes.
He was allowed to stay on as owner, but could not participate in any day-to-day activities. So banned for life.
From what?
Exactly. During that ban, a new general manager brought on Derek Jeter and Andy Pettitte and made other managerial decisions that initiated a turnaround for the Yankees. And in 1993, Steinbrenner somehow convinced the commission to overturn his ban. The way that he convinced them was like, actually, the owners have more power than the commission. The commission kind of works for the owners. And obviously, he's like super close with all the owners. So he just pulled some
strings.
Thank you. Pulled some strings. He was back in charge in 1993, setting up the Yankees for the acclaimed Joe Torre years. Dave Winfield allowed himself to be traded to the California Angels in 1990. He's finally like,
I've had it.
And the California Angels were like, we're actually willing to pay you a lot of money.
He's like, I'll swing that bat. Here we go.
Yeah, and this guy freaking hates me. Like, okay, I'm done. Out of here. As far as Howie Spira's claims against him, quote, there's really no benefit in commenting. It's like dealing with someone with fleas. That's what Winfield said about Howie Spira.
I love that.
Yeah. I mean, he comes out like of this entire mess as a class act. Howie Spira was convicted of trying to extort $110,000 from Steinbrenner and spent over 2 years in prison. And that is my baseball story.
Howie Spira, a cautionary tale. Don't gamble. Don't gamble with the mob's money. Because everything he did was completely cockamamie. Like a disorganized, like, I'll try this. I'll grasp at this straw. I'll grasp at that straw. Oh, you won't give me 100,000? 40,000's fine. But now 40,000 isn't fine. Now I want more because I realize I need some more to get out of Dodge.
Oh my God. If you hear, because again, he recorded all of his conversations with George Steinbrenner. So you hear George Steinbrenner being like, but I gave you money. What do you mean? I tried to help you. I mean, you actually start to feel kind of sorry for the guy. And Spira's like, I spent it. And Steinbrenner's like, that's not my problem. And Spira's like, well, it is because I need more. I mean, it's just like, oh my God, dealing with this guy must have just, of course you run to the FBI eventually.
The fact that he recorded himself as though he's the one in the right and protecting himself from Steinbrenner is hilarious because all of that could be subpoenaed and requested for it in discovery. Yeah, like, are you joking?
Yes, and he did go to jail.
Yeah.
You have, I mean, please tell me you're going to watch this documentary. It's in 3 parts. It is so good. And this is just one of the stories that they tell about this crazy, crazy time when the Yankees were actually just sucking. So you might enjoy it.
Yes, I think I would enjoy it. But, you know, I don't want to get into a Trump conversation because we'll get lost down that rabbit hole. However, Steinbrenner, the fact that Trump took a page from Steinbrenner's book is not surprising because people like that eventually piss off enough people. Look, you may not lose entirely, but you're gonna stumble. And there's going to be something very unpleasant that you need to weather.
And I'm going to circle back to the whole conversation about managerial style, because character aside, all of this hiring, firing, and not actually developing somebody in the job that they have, once he had to leave because he got that supposedly lifetime ban, then the people who were brought in to be managers and coaches had a completely different approach. And they were like, we're not going to get these high ticket price, flashy guys. We're going to get young guys who show promise and who are willing to work in a team environment. And that's what they did. And then the team started to gel, and they weren't working as individuals. They were working together. And it's night and day. The proof is in the pudding. Then they started winning. But it was these not very flashy coaches and managers who came in and were like,
they
scientists,
did the job.
Scientists of the game. They weren't there to talk to the press. They were there to do their job. And it was about development, about mentoring, about...
Well, which Steinbrenner also was clearly not capable of. Because if he was, he would have been interested in it. And then he would have done it. People who are not capable.
Like, where's a shiny coin? I like that one. I want that one over there. And the shiny things that he picked up, the players that were sort of flashy and interesting and he thought were, going to razzle bedazzle everybody. I know. I'm sorry. I'm a theater person.
I love razzle bedazzle.
But they're the ones who flamed out. They would throw their shoulder out and then that's it for the entire season. I learned a lot about baseball.
I bet you did. Do you think it's worth mentioning anything about the whole Seinfeld obsession?
Oh, yeah. I don't know much about it. They just mention it briefly in the documentary, but.
Well, apparently Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David found all of this very entertaining and found Steinbrenner to be the clown that he is. And George winds up working for Steinbrenner. And you only see the back of Steinbrenner's head. And I think it was played by Larry David.
Oh, it was. Absolutely.
And he just barks out the most ridiculous shit you could possibly imagine. And George is running, hither and thither. But I'm sure that there's a compilation on YouTube someplace of the Steinbrenner episodes or Steinbrenner moments, and they are really quite hilarious. So worth seeing.
And he loved it, by the way. The real George Steinbrenner friggin' loved being on Seinfeld. He loved any popularity. He put me in the news. You can make fun of me if you want, but he had a sense of humor about himself and he wanted press.
Well, he got it.
Jessica, I completely forgot. I wanted to tell you.
Okay.
A follow-up on last week's episode. Remember the fireman, Dennis Devlin? He spoke to the press, and I saw him on the local ABC News
mm-hmm.
talking about how he thought he was going to hear cries and moans.
And that it was silence, right.
And so I listened and watched a whole interview with him on YouTube that, was
mm-hmm.
filmed in 1990. And I was searching for him this week because I wanted to post a picture of him. He was killed at 9/11.
Stop it.
Isn't that wild?
Horrible. Wow.
Yeah.
Mm.
He was a volunteer at that point. He'd retired, but when he heard the call come in, he went.
Horrible.
To the site.
That's very sad.
He's beloved. His obituary is beautiful.
Well, maybe we'll post a photo of him.
Oh, absolutely.
A little remembrance. Yeah. Well, from the sublime to the ridiculous. Ready? Here's my engagement question for you. When you think of Lionel Richie, what song do you think of?
Endless Love?
That's not him.
Damn. We Are the World?
Okay.
What did he do that was like Endless Love?
I mean, he had a lot of sort of...
The duet. It's a duet.
We're going to have to look it up.
It's fine. Whatever. It doesn't matter what I was thinking because I was wrong.
But now I need to know, what if God forbid he didn't do it? I was like,
look it up. If you contradicted me and I was right, I'm just going to
you'll
gloat.
Never let me. I know. Well, what a shock.
Please, God.
I'm going to make something up now just so you can't gloat for Endless Love song.
Fuck! Yes! Oh my God, I am so happy.
God damn it! I thought it was Peebo Bryson. Fuck.
Meg was right about
Okay,
something.
can you just like, you're always right about everything. Like, why do you have to like freaking rub it in? Jesus. Well, that's not my point anyway.
Okay, what song do you think of?
Well, I think of All Night Long because
Okay.
I was subjected to a bunch of women singing that drunkenly on a flight to Brazil
I'm so
all
sorry.
night long.
I'm so sorry.
And of course, Hello.
Yes.
Because silliest video ever. But one that I don't normally think of, but that came up to, for this week's episode for me was Say You, Say Me. Do you remember that song?
Yes.
With impenetrable lyrics like Say You, Say Me,
sorry,
Say It
but
for Always.
He is not a good lyricist.
He's a terrible lyricist.
Ugh. It's
Hello?
mind numbing.
Is it me you're looking for? No. Actually, no, I'm not. Like, that's a quick answer. Like, what if she said no? Not good. So Say You, Say Me, completely impenetrable, right? Well,
Dumb.
it sort of goes along with the film that it was one of the theme songs for. In 1985, Mikhail Baryshnikov
Yes.
and Gregory Hines
Yes.
starred in White Nights.
Yes.
Now, we're going to go on a little trip
I'm so excited.
because Baryshnikov had already been in a magnificent film, The Turning Point, with Shirley MacLaine. And he was luminous.
Already a huge heartthrob.
I mean, and quite rightly.
Yes.
So for people who know him as
magician,
from Sex and the City, look at him, look at photos of him from the 70s and 80s, and you will be like, oh my God. He is so beautiful. Then look at a video of him dancing. And you will pretty much have your scalp hair blow off. So this film was not good. It was not a good movie.
White Nights?
White Nights. In hindsight, it was not a good film.
Was it a political thriller somehow?
Well, yes, it was. And because White Nights is not really what I'm talking about, I'm going to let Vincent Canby, who reviewed it for the Times, give us a few words about it.
Okay. And we also have to say Gregory Hines, also insanely talented. Holy crap.
Like
what he can do is just, it's like that's inhuman. What is that?
He was so amazing and so charming and lovely in everything. Like, you just wanted to watch him because he was just easy.
He had a cameo in the Muppet movie. The Muppets Take Manhattan. That is, of course, hysterical.
He did. Oh.
He was roller skating.
Stop it right now. So Vincent Canby said in 1985, as star vehicles go, Taylor Hackford's White Nights is an Edsel. The only reason to buy it, meaning believe in it, not purchase it, and it's a compelling one, is Mikhail Baryshnikov, the Russian ballet star who defected to the West in 1974 and made his debut as a dancer-actor in The Turning Point. With White Nights, it's evident that he's almost as much of a powerhouse personality in films. Co-starring with Baryshnikov is Gregory Hines, who's a great tap dancer, but not in the same league with Mr. Baryshnikov as a film personality. I disagree. Certainly not with the kind of material that's offered by the ludicrous screenplay by James Goldman and Eric Hughes. Now, I was reading this, and as I was reading it, I was like, oh my God, Vincent Canby was right. I remember seeing this at 15 and loving it. Like, loved it, which clearly you did too.
I don't remember.
Are you kidding me?
I mean, I have flashes in my head, and I remember that it was political something or other, but I don't remember the plot. I don't.
Well, I'll tell you what it was. So Baryshnikov played himself. He played Baryshnikov, who had defected, but he's on a flight going from point A to point B for some performance, and the flight crashes in Siberia.
Oh, bummer.
And so now, he's back in Russia.
Oh,
and
God, that's really bad luck.
It's bad news, right? And like, what are the odds? And what are what are the odds that an American who defected to Russia because he was disillusioned with the Vietnam War and racism.
Is that what you're saying Gregory Hines was?
Yes.
That's ridiculous.
Yes, gets better. So he's in Siberia because he was first useful to the Russian government. And then they were like, you kind of are not useful anymore. So we're going to make you like be in shitty plays in Siberia.
Moral to the story, do not defect to Russia.
Yeah.
That's not a good move.
Completely freaking ridiculous. So, and his wife is played by Isabella Rossellini.
Oh my God.
The magical Rossellini, whose entire role is being like, oh no, and being really frumpy. Do you remember the Wendy's 1980s commercials where they were talking about how you had choice at Wendy's? So they would say what it was like at the other burger places, and they had women coming out on runways in Russian sack dresses.
Don't remember this.
You don't remember this?
No.
Oh my God. So they would be like, swimwear. And she comes out in the dress holding a beach ball. And then they're like, evening wear. And she comes out with a flashlight.
Are you kidding?
No, always in the same dress. It's hilariously fun. Like, it was a great campaign. But that's what Isabella Rossellini looks like in the. It's just like lumpy and
because they couldn't say that like beautiful women were in Russia, I guess.
And married to a black man.
Ooh,
that was, there was a lot of like, what I loved about this movie is that Taylor Hackford's trying to be like, it's 1985 and we're going to turn things around with the most trope-laden script that's ever happened in the history of tropiness. Here you go. So hilariously, these two miskites are told by the Russian government, we're going to treat you better if you spy on Nikolai. So you got to make friends with him, because there's no way that two dancers are going to find common ground and be buddies together ever. So they're like, okay, we'll do it. So they start spying on him. And of course, there is the inevitable dance-off.
That's what I remember.
And it's worth whatever you have to sit through. The dance-off is worth it. But then,
it's obviously the only reason they wrote the entire script around it.
Yes, absolutely. Vincent Canby says, it isn't even about politics. It's a makeshift melodrama in which the KGB agent shouts as his American hostages are escaping his clutches, call out the militia, cover all the foreign consulates. A line like that belongs in a James Bond movie, not something that aspires to the seriousness of White Knights. Now, Taylor Hackford had just come off the high of directing An Officer and a Gentleman and Against All Odds. So this was like, what happened, Mr. Hackford? Yeah. What happens in the film is that somehow the American government saves. Now, mind you, he like, I don't even know if he was an American citizen in the film. Like, it doesn't even make that terribly clear. But the American government, because this is like a cowboys and Native American movie.
Oh, you're so funny. I hear you. I hear where you're going from.
And so the Americans come in to the rescue. And there are like these scenes with like them doing ballet leaps off of fire escapes. It's so doofy. Like, so the American government comes in to like reclaim Baryshnikov. And we're like, but what will happen to Gregory Hines, who's been like beaten by the KGB? And there is, of course, like, they're all waiting there. Will they release him? And like, it's dark and there's snow swirling. And then you see a broken man limping into the light. And it's Gregory Hines.
Thank God.
Ready to tap for America.
Oh my God. Get him back.
We got him back. So this movie, which
God
seems
bless the USA.
Absolutely, which seems absolutely as doofy as can be. When I read about Baryshnikov, who is really the subject of my little thing here today, I was like, this is actually really on point for him and his life. I've been aware in the 80s. So let's talk about Ballet. Okay. So in the 80s, so in 1980, I'm 10. What did little girls do? Little girls took ballet classes. Did you take ballet classes?
I absolutely took ballet
Okay,
classes
so
with Phyllis Goldman.
who is Phyllis Goldman? You make it sound like she's someone I should know. Was she like Phyllis Goldman from 5A in the building? Phyllis Goldman makes a fantastic chicken soup and teaches a good plie.
Actually,
Yes.
she did teach out of her apartment on Park Avenue and 95th Street. But she taught many generations of young women. Joanna took lessons from Phyllis Goldman, and her daughter was a member of ABT. I mean, she knew her stuff.
All right. So ABT is going to come back into this. But here's what I learned, which I really did not know, is that the Russian government used the ballet as soft propaganda. It was entirely political, 110%. And when they finally let the Bolshoi and the Kirov dance outside of Russia, it was an incredibly big deal. And it was done specifically to create a vision, a perspective about Russia that would be popularized and would be exciting and would be like an emotional draw and make people love the dancers.
I can see
and so
that.
if you love the dancers, you're going to feel some kind of connection to them and where they're from. So here's a little thing about how this still is true, that the ballet is political. So in 2022, Lindsay Winship wrote in The Guardian, when the independent Russian TV station Dozhd, or TV Rain, was forced off air by the government earlier this month, its final act was to cut to footage of the ballet Swan Lake. That was epic trolling, says a cultural historian, Simon Morrison, author of the book Bolshoi Confidential. It was the same footage that was played on every Russian TV channel as tanks rolled into Moscow during the attempted coup in August 1991. When the putsch happened in the Gorbachev era, the screens turned to Swan Lake because they didn't want people to know what was happening, explains Morrison. So Dozhd was trolling them for mass censorship. You don't want people to know what's happening in Ukraine? Here's your Swan Lake.
Wow.
So that's what we're dealing with even now. That's how entrenched it is. So one of the things that I was thinking about, so my as usual, like there are a lot of threads that went into this. I was thinking about, of course, the 80s. And I was like, what was really popular then? It just isn't here anymore. And I was thinking about like every little girl took ballet classes, and Jill Kremens did those amazing photographic essays with all of the text. A very young equestrian, but a very young dancer was the number one hit of all of her books.
Absolutely every little girl read and memorized that book and put themselves in the shoes of a very little dancer. It was a huge, huge cultural moment. I wonder if it was that way across the country. It certainly was in New York.
It was. I think that it was, because I've met other women who as young girls had that. But in New York City, for sure, it was a thing. And Jill Kremens was New York based. But dance classes, there were so many ballet schools that didn't have anything to do with ballet companies, like the Corps de Ballet of ABT or any other dance company in New York. They had their juniors, but there was Harkness House where you could take it. There was Phyllis Goldman.
I went from Phyllis Goldman to Harkness.
Oh, I was at Harkness too.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever have Mr. Tallinn, Nikita Tallinn?
I had Phyllis Goldman the whole time.
Oh, really? I had Nikita Tallinn, who was like the classic. He would sit in a chair and then hit the girls on the leg with a big stick.
When we went to Greece and we lived in Greece for a year, my mother put me in a dance class, a Greek dance class, but it was, so I didn't speak the language, but you didn't have to speak the language. And she would manhandled
you.
me.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I did not mind. Make me be better.
I minded the stick just for whatever that's worth. And I knew that it wasn't for me because all of the other girls had like all of the accoutrement. Like it was full on Capezio sweaters, you know, like the ballet sweaters and
No, indeed.
all of that. And this is a callback to your episode about the Muppets, your segment about the Muppets. I wore a sweatshirt, like a baseball sweatshirt that had a decal of Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem. I did not fit in. It wasn't right. So I was like, that's enough for me. But that was everywhere. And like we knew the names of the dancers. Like it was a thing. And even like, you know, everything now for little girls, backpacks and lunch boxes and all of that. It's like cute little animals. It was ballet slippers. It was all of that when we were kids. You know, I was thinking, why was it so massive in the 80s? What was that about? Why was that such a big deal? And I think I kind of found out why. So to quickly go back to The Guardian, the ballets and the companies themselves reflected political ideology. The hierarchy of the court is represented in the ranks of the company. Petipa put on stage a model of behavior and decorum within a space that was highly controlled, ultra-civilized but ultra-repressive at the same time. The ballets were then reframed for the Soviet era, the massed movement of the corps de ballet, easy to convert into the Soviet experience, where the individual desire and aspiration is defined through the collective. Under director Yuri Grigorovich from 1964 to 1995, Bolshoi ballets such as Spartacus and Ivan the Terrible demonstrated Soviet might and morals. Okay, so that's a bit of backdrop. But what happened? Like how did this excitement around ballet happen? And I think that it all started in 1956 when the Bolshoi and the Kirov went and danced in London. And that was quickly followed by defections. And so there's a huge amount of drama in defections of these Russian dancers who, interestingly, were also, none of them were from Moscow. They were all from St. Petersburg, which obviously had a very different gestalt. When the American Ballet Theater visited the USSR in 1960 to follow up the 1956 visit, the New York City Ballet were in Moscow in 62. By the way, just quickly about the politicization. When the Cuban Missile Crisis kicked off, they were told that the U.S. Embassy had no power to intervene if the dancers were interned there. New York City ballet dancers remembered a tepid response at the premiere, the audience not wanting to seem too enthusiastic, even as political tensions were rising. Meanwhile, the Bolshoi were in America. As long as they keep dancing and the diplomats keep talking, we'll have no war, said producer Saul Hurok at the time. So stakes were high. Then, in 1961, or at the same time, in 1961, Rudolf Nureyev, gorgeous, amazing dancer who would fly through the air with the greatest of ease. He is with the ballet company and he's in Paris. And he very dramatically, in the airport, turns to the gendarme and says, I want to stay and to be free. And that was that. And they gave him asylum. He was followed by Natalia Makarova, who defected in London in 1970, or Makarova, I think it's Makarova, who defected in London in 1970. And then our boy, Baryshnikov, in Toronto in 1974.
I'm amazed that Russia let them leave the country after they started defecting.
Well, they were stuck because they needed to keep the propaganda going. So they sent the dancers with KGB agents who guarded them. As a quick aside, we had eventually white knights, sadly. The Soviets made a dramatization about Flight 222 and the 1979 defection of Bolshoi dancer Alexander Godunov. Now, you may know him.
Wait,
the Russians. The Russians made this movie about his defection.
All right.
But you may know Godunov He was in Witness and Die Hard.
Oh.
He's that giant blonde guy.
Wow.
He was
a dancer?
a major dancer. He died at the age of 45
Oh, that's horrible.
of alcoholism.
Oh, no.
Here's a quick and interesting piece of information. He was dating Bewitched's Elizabeth Montgomery. They died the same day.
Oh, my God.
Isn't that weird? Not together.
Didn't she die of colon cancer?
Yes, she did. Now we're in 1980. So Baryshnikov, it's 1980. He is now the creative director of ABT. And he takes over and he changes dance and makes it modern. He makes ballet up to date.
Cool.
And his beauty and his ability and his rapport with the dancers and the dancers that he pulled into ABT. And then there was, a reciprocal movement with the New York City Ballet. That was the energy that made the 80s dance centric. It was him. Now, I found out about his defection, and it's quite dramatic. It makes Nureyev, who was by the way, I know this, he was in a turtleneck, like looking fabulous. And he was like, I want to be free. No, Baryshnikov had a slightly different experience. So he is dancing in Toronto. In June of 1974, Baryshnikov and the rest of the dancers arrived in Toronto for the final performance of their Canadian tour. John Fraser, a Toronto area reporter who covered the arts, received a phone call from theater critic Clive Barnes of The Times. Barnes was a huge fan of Baryshnikov and once called him the, quote, most perfect dancer. Barnes asked Fraser to reach out to Baryshnikov and give him the telephone number belonging to some of Barnes' friends in New York. It was tricky, but Fraser was able to use his press credentials to get a few moments alone with Baryshnikov and pass along the phone numbers. Later, Baryshnikov was able to sneak away from his KGB watchdogs long enough to make the phone call.
How did Clive Barnes know that Baryshnikov wanted to defect? He just gambled.
He gambled.
He's like, let me just give it a shot.
He's a fan. And maybe in his fandom and critic life, like someone, like he made a passing comment. Who knows?
Who knows? Okay.
So what happened was that the KGB minders didn't let him out of their sight from the second he got off stage. So he has to change. He's got to do everything with these guys surrounding him.
Ew.
And they have a hold of him when they are taking him to the bus to go to the plane. So he's basically a prisoner.
Absolutely.
And it looked like he was not going to be able to get away from them. Like everything was going to be for nothing. But guess who helped?
Someone on stage?
His fans. So he comes out of the stage door and his fans it's a mob scene and they surround him. And they're not intending to do anything, but they completely envelop him and there's shoving and there's pushing. He's able to wrench himself away from the KGB.
Oh my God.
So the crowd was so big that there was you could run in a direction within the crowd.
Like he was body surfing.
Yes. And he was he's a short little guy. He was 5'6".
I didn't know that.
So he was able to get low.
Oh my God.
And he ran through the crowd to where his friends were waiting in a car. And he ran into the car and they sped off into the Canadian countryside.
Holy crap.
Isn't that amazing? He was whisked to a secluded farmhouse and kept hidden while the paperwork for his political asylum was put together. Needless to say, the Russians were super pissed because it made worldwide news. So now they have a whole lineup.
That's not the propaganda they want.
Exactly. A lineup of people saying no thank you. In the meantime, while everything was being negotiated, the Russian government was erasing him from their records. So it's like he never lived. Goodbye.
Okay, well, so what? We got him now.
Yeah, seriously. So he dances with the National Ballet of Canada, and then he makes his way to New York City, where all these people are waiting for him. He was with several dance companies.
I
And
love
then
that
he started his
Clive
own.
Barnes
I
is
know.
part of this. It's
I
so
know.
crazy.
And what's so great is that when interviewed in the 80s about why he did it, I think it was a 1986 interview. It was like, was it the politics? Was it getting away from Russia? Was it hating the KGB? He said, no, it was an artistic choice. Now, remember how I said at the beginning of this that the Soviets didn't allow their dancers to be anything but a giant corps de ballet. He was like, that's not for me. And he knew that he had so much potential and that it would be wasted and ridiculous if he didn't try to get away and dance as he became, the greatest known male ballet dancer of all time.
Of all time.
And so he went into the 80s. He started the 80s, 1980, after 6 years after defecting as the artistic director of ABT, and then a movie star, and on and on and on. And I really encourage you, because I hadn't seen him dance in a very long time. And I think it's from 1981 on YouTube. It's an American dance. It's like sort of like modern dance and ballet. And he's a sailor. And it's like two sailors on leave with some girls, and they're trying to woo the girls. I don't think I've ever seen anything sexier in my life, because he's sort of loose-limbed and like showing off. And you're like, you can be 5'6", that's fine.
Oh, yeah.
You could be 5'3", I don't care. That's absolutely okay, Misha. No problem. So, and it's why, for young people who are watching Sex and the City for the first time, the original series, and wondering, who is this old man that everyone gives a shit about? Go back, because all of the women who are watching it, who are our contemporaries in the 90s, were like, oh my God.
Well done, Carrie.
Yes, well done, Carrie. Even though he's a total jackass.
Oh,
well
in the
done.
show?
Oh, horrible.
Oh, no.
Horrible jackass.
Bad.
But, he's Baryshnikov. So he became the king of the 80s and made dance in New York City just feverish, and for good reason.
What's our tie-in?
Ballet, baseball, they're both team sports.
Nice. Okay, we'll leave it there.
That's it.